everybody, welcome to another episode of Marketing, Management, and Money. I am your host, Ryan Murray.
And I am Ethan Migliori.
So today we're going to be talking about like money wasters that I see a lot in small businesses. And this is something that just creep is the word that not like, that creep maybe.
That. Please come on, explain that.
we're already off to a great start. No, creep in the sense that these things kind of creep into your business. And at first, people don't think that it's a big deal. They're not really, super concerned about it. But when you get into a business that's been operating for a period of time, and when I say period of time, months could really build up some money wasters in your business. So even, businesses that are just starting out are going to start seeing some of that creep come in. And I just want to kill them, just like these things that are coming in. They're eating away at your profitability. They're eating away at your effectiveness, your efficiencies. And I just want to talk about some of the more common ones that we see in small businesses.
And another thing I think we ought to talk about is how do we kill them? Because you can talk about what they are, and that's easy to do. I mean, we could talk about that one for hours, but making sure that you understand how to effectively kill them. Because I know we'll talk about two of the most common ones tied to marketing and then tied to overstaffing is probably a good word to use on that one. So we also want to talk about ways to kill those or effective solutions for them as well.
Yeah. And so let's start with this idea of overstaffing. I mean, you mentioned the two, and I kind of want to hold marketing for a little bit later because that's
a big one.
There's a lot there, but let's talk about this overstaffing, and I want to put an umbrella to it if we can. And what I mean by put an umbrella to it is prioritization. I think starts a lot of problems. When you've got the wrong priorities in your business, and then you start looking for the wrong solutions. It's this idea that if I throw enough mud at the wall, something is going to stick. And I'm like, not necessarily. You might just be throwing a lot of mud and it's just all sliding down. It's not a guarantee that just because you're putting effort into it, that something is going to stick there.
So in your opinion, what are some signs that a company can say, all right, these are some signs that say that I am overstaffed? I know you talk about the mud kind of principle, and I get it, but what are some clear examples for an organization that they know, hey, I am overstaffed?
Yeah. So there's a balance here because you want to use your people as assets. You want to get as much work out of them as you can. But if you're overworking people, then and that's that's where things start to go south on the this is a pendulum here, right? And so things start to go south because right at first when you're overworking someone, it looks great. They're kind of excited to take on a new project or that something's finally happening and they really want to move forward. But, burnout starts to come in, and burnout's not sudden. It's like over time. I actually, right. So one of the guys that I oversee, I've been noticing the last few weeks that he's been a little off, and I actually pulled him aside just the other day and I was like, what's going on? He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, something's going on. What is bothering you? And he's like, oh, I don't know. I've been in a funk for about the last week. And I'm like, you've been in a funk for the last 4 weeks. And he's like, really? And I pointed out some of the things that I was seeing, and he appreciated it because he's looking at it and he's like, yeah, I just, I just don't know. I'm not super motivated and different things like that. But I think part of it is we had just done a big push, and he was engaged in that push. He'd done some great things. The previous year had been kind of a crazy year, so people were working hard, and it was just starting to catch up to him. And so anyway, that's one thing. I mean, I know we're talking, the money waster of overstaffing, but I want to put that caution out there to say, don't understaff or don't overwork your people just trying to avoid this, this issue of overstaffing. So,
and can I throw in one other point that goes solid to what you're saying, is that money is only a satisfier. And so
we've talked about this before.
Yeah. And as you overwork them, At some point in time, because money's only a satisfier, they're no longer satisfied.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have another incentive in there to do that. All right. So let's not, I won't say any more about that because we want to focus on the waster piece of this.
Right. So this is what I always start with. I always start and look and say, what is the capacity of all of my, labor force? And how well am I using this capacity? Now, I will tell you, if you are using your capacity at 100%, that is a mistake. Your goal is about 80%. So if you think about the typical 40-hour work week, which for small businesses doesn't make a lot of sense, but just run with this 40-hour work week for a second, right? If I've got a 40-hour work week, that means that I want to see my people actively producing about 32 hours a week. And 8 hours, I'm not worried about. And that's a hard concept because everyone's like, no, you want to use the full, that's a full day that's just gone. And I'm like, yeah, it is a full day that's gone. And where does it go? It goes into administrative meetings. It goes into, they just need some downtime. It goes into, whatever the case may be. And so the first thing that I'm looking at when I'm looking at wasters is I'm saying, okay, I want 32 hours. Now, I need to put a caveat out there that if you're running, manufacturing, assembly, production, the rules are different. Okay. I'm talking about managing office staff, salespeople, marketing teams, R&D teams, people that are using more of a creative capacity, people that are sitting at computers and doing work. That's more what this is in line for. If someone is part of a flow, then it's whatever your flow is set up to be. So please keep that in mind. That's a different equation. But in the sense of creative capacity, I'm looking at, 40 hours a week. I want 32 hours of solid work coming out of this person. And then the question is, what does that 32 hours look like? If you ask your employees, if you sit them down and you say, hey, we're going to talk about what your schedule looks like. And if they answer you, if you say, well, what's your week? And they're just like, oh, well, I've got emails that I've got to check. And then people are always, calling me. And then I just have things that I need to take care of. Like vague. Like what I want someone to say is, I want them to say, okay, the majority of my job is in, planning, making sure that, I've got a plan in place that I can communicate that plan to the team and that everyone knows what they are supposed to be doing. And so I'm going to hit on Friday, I'm going to make sure that I have an action plan in place for our Monday meeting so that my team can hit Monday and they know what they're doing for the week. That's a more precise answer. That's someone who actually knows what their job is, and that's someone who's doing their job correctly.
And the only way that you get to that point as a manager or as an owner is having production or project-based work and getting away from managing by the hour.
Yes.
If you manage by the hour, you're never going to move to the next level.
Mm-hmm.
You're too busy micromanaging and you're too worried about every second versus, are they getting the work done? And are we meeting our deadlines? Because I don't care how they do it as long as that's happening.
Right. And so if they understand what they're supposed to be doing, again, I'm looking at that capacity and I'm saying, am I utilizing their capacity? Now, there's nothing wrong with having someone who is underutilized if they're moving in that right direction. In fact, as you do, whatever you're doing, as you do it more often, you're supposed to get better at it, which means that you're supposed to introduce efficiencies. So someone who they were swamped, 6 months ago, they should be starting to ease off 6 months later. And they should be like, well, that meeting that we used to have, we figured out a way to automate that. And so now we just send out a weekly report and we've completely, removed that meeting because we now have a report that is going to, do the same thing for us. And so you should see efficiencies happening. And as I'm looking at these project-based, I'm trying to find people that are actively improving, that are actively completing deliverables, that are, making progress. And that's how I know that they're doing a good job. But overstaffing happens when you have people that are watching the clock. That's a huge one. If you ever have someone who is sitting down and you're like, oh, what are you doing? Oh, well, it's 4:52. And so I got 8 minutes. You know what, sir, you have as much time as you want because I just fired you. Like that is a clear sign. If you ever have anybody who is watching the clock and trying to get their time in, then that's a clear sign that you've got the wrong person, and sometimes it's a training issue, sometimes because this is cultural and it's hard to break culture, and so sometimes it's a training issue, but sometimes it's their mentality. Like they are there to collect a paycheck and nothing more.
But if you establish that as the culture of your company, you'll find that whatever that culture is going to ripple through systematically through everyone eventually, because the one bad apple will eventually get to a second or a third. It may not get the whole basket, but it's going to affect a few more. So when you can get away from having employees who feel like I need to be here because I'm just doing my time, to I want to be here because I have good projects that I'm working on. I have some flexibility when the production goes up, their efficiency goes up.
Yeah.
You get rid of the dead lag, or you find that as you delegate to certain individuals, you learn what their capability is because they start to have failures. And that's okay. I mean, that's one principle we teach all the time, is that you need to be delegating to individuals so you can figure out where their breaking point is, not to fire them, but to understand what that is. So as projects come up, we know which ones not to delegate to.
Right. And there's nothing wrong with taking a project away from somebody and just be like, you're not the right person for this.
Yeah. And if that's an open principle inside of your business, if that culture is established, no one's offended by projects that come and go because they understand that's not the right fit for me.
Yeah.
Jack or Jane over here is a better fit and they're going to be more efficient.
Right.
And then we start to avoid those wage losses because we have someone who's inefficiently or not as effective doing it. The same argument that you and I make all the time is that if the water heater goes out of my house and a plumber comes in, he's going to do it faster and more efficient. Can I do it?
Sure.
Yeah, I'll eventually get there by the end of the day. But they'll come in and do it in 4 hours, half the time. They're more efficient at what they do. And that's the same principle we're trying to do inside of your business, is to get rid of those time wasters when it comes especially to employees, that we create a culture where we're putting the most qualified and skilled individuals for those tasks, knowing that each individual is unique. And as each project comes along, that's probably going to change on who we put on them.
Yeah. And so I really like that we were able to talk about, project-based. If you want to get rid of waste, and that's ultimately, that's what we're discussing today. If you want to get rid of waste, and when we're talking about waste cost, it's a financial waste, right? There are other wastes that come into play, but looking at it from a financial perspective, if you want to get rid of it, you got to tie things to deliverables, project-based. You don't want time watchers, clock watchers, and so that's one of the first things that I'm looking at to make sure that I'm utilizing the hours, the capacity. I understand the capacity of people. So I'm going to take this a step further now. And I want to talk about tying this or connecting this to the financial statements. If you want to eliminate waste in your company, you need to be able to connect your people to the financial statements. And a lot of this is going to happen on the profit and loss side, but it can happen in multiple places. If someone's doing inventory management, then that's going to be a balance sheet kind of thing. But for simplicity's sake, let's just keep it on the P&L side here, right? So when I'm looking at an employee and they're producing stuff, I want to know what's that stuff valued at. And I need to put some value to that stuff. Is it a final product deliverable, or is it an input that I need along the way? And a lot of times we get confused because some of these things are hard to measure. So, I've got someone on my team and they're doing the social media marketing for my company. And I look at it and I'm like, oh, cool. Look at how many posts they got out. And I'm like, who cares how many posts they got out? That is a really crappy metric to go off of, because I can sit there all day and I can just produce junk and I can just, retweet whatever was going on that day. And it's not there's no value there. But that's usually where people stop, is they look at it and they're just like, oh, I just want the value of how many posts are you getting out. I'm like, no. What does this do for the P&L? And posts, number of posts has nothing to do with your P&L. So I want to start looking to, other things. And I'm like, okay, sales is a great one to link to. And so I want to know how many products am I actually selling through my social media channels? I want to know, what is the process? What does that sales funnel look like? So if I've got to get someone all the way through my sales funnel and this is a lead generation, then I want to know what percentage of leads that are coming from social media are actually translating to a sale. And I want to compare that to other lead generation activities that I'm doing. And I want to look and see, is this all making sense? And so I guess what I really want to, take away with this concept is to say, if you want to eliminate waste, you got to put numbers behind it. And those numbers have to link to the financials, period. There's no exception to that. It's got to link to the financials. I don't care if it links indirectly, but you got to have some path from what they are doing to the financial statements.
So from there, let's jump over to advertising.
Okay.
Because if we go in more on that, we need to actually have probably another cast just on that specifically to connect those, which we have some out there, and you've done some in the past that go in specifically into that. So they are searchable to find some of those additional answers, and maybe we'll do an additional follow-up to this one, because that is an important concept, because a lot of people have a hard time tying certain operational activities to financial statements. Mm-hmm. And the more you can do that, the more efficient your business runs. You can find the wasters a lot easier. Mm-hmm. So let's jump over to advertising, because this is the bigger one, and where people make a ton of mistakes. And I'm always going to push that marketing decisions need to be driven dominantly by data.
Yes.
And too many people don't do that. Mm-hmm. They, someone comes in and says, hey, why don't you do this? We have a special running on advertising this month. Why don't you buy X amount of square inches or time or whatever it's going to be, without really putting much more thought to it than that. And that is a huge waste when it comes to advertising dollars. So
before we get too deep into this, I need to make a very big clarification. Advertisement and marketing are not the same thing.
Correct.
And when we're talking about waste, I find more waste in advertisement. That's why, you mentioned, you're like, okay, we're looking at, advertisement and waste in advertisement. There's a lot more waste that happens in advertisement than happens in marketing, but there's waste in both, and where you want to put the data behind it. So here's my take on it. And this is kind of the overview that I want to look at. And then we can delve into some of the nuances, some of the subtleties that are happening here. The first thing that I'm looking at is okay, what is the ROI, and make it very specific. You talked about data, and that's the first data point that I'm always going to on the advertisement side of things. Now, on advertisement, it's easier to get an ROI, return on investment. It's easier to get an ROI if you're looking at advertisement. Marketing efforts, sometimes it's a little bit more complicated. But, so if we talk about, if I'm going to put an advertisement out there, whether it be, something online or print, print still works. It still makes sense. Radio still makes sense. It depends what business you're in, what industry you're in, who your target market is. But, all of these mediums do make sense for certain businesses. So if I put an advertisement out there, what am I using as a gauge to tell me what my ROI is? And if I haven't started with that, then the chances of this being a waste is huge. It's exponential how likely it is that this is going to be a waste, because I don't even know what I'm trying to accomplish. I'm just making crap up and hoping I get lucky.
So what is your rule of thumb for someone who has a marketing budget? Of course, we want, like I said, a dominant portion tied to a very focused target market. We have data. We're driven by demographics. We know who we're going after. Versus, there's a piece of it that maybe we're just trying to find new markets, new customers, things like that. What is your rule of thumb when it comes to what can I not afford to mess up, and what can I gamble with per se?
Yeah. So I'm going to default to the 80-20 rule. So 80% of my marketing budget needs to be tried and true stuff that I know is going to work, stuff that I'm very confident in. 20% can be new, random stuff, taking a gamble, seeing what happens, and you have to have both. Like you can't, you do emphasize, you personally, you emphasize how important data is when you're looking at marketing. And I totally agree, but it's not the only option. And so I like to do that 80-20. That's a 4-to-1 ratio. So that's saying that if I'm going to spend, $10,000, on marketing, then $8,000 needs to be spent on something that I know what I'm going to get. And I need to experiment with $2,000 because I got to try new things. I got to figure new things out and make sure that they're making sense. And so what I mean by stuff that's tried and true, anything that I've already done that already has results behind it that I can get data from, those are going to be tried and true. Things that if I'm just starting out and I don't have a lot of history, then I'm going after industry standards. If everyone in the industry is engaged in a certain type of marketing effort, I look at real estate, for example, and I'm not trying to, dog on anyone who's a realtor, but this is a great example. Everyone who's a realtor tries to set themselves apart, and 90% of realtors are cookie cutter. They do the exact same thing to list your house. They've got their website that they're going to put it on. They've got whatever website in the area people go to find houses. They're always going to slap a yard sign up. Some of them are going to make it a little bit nicer, but it's going to be the same thing. And, they're going to kick off with an open house. Like the way that you market to sell a house is pretty straightforward. And so if I was a realtor, I'd be saying, yeah, I need to spend my time and my money on those areas. But then what about that 20%? What can I do that's a little bit creative? You don't hear a lot of radio ads for, houses for sale. Try it and see what happens. Take a little bit of money, just buy a $500 spot. Well, I guess it depends. If you're in a small community, $500 spot. If you're in a bigger community, it's probably more, like a $2,000 or $3,000 spot. But still, pick up a spot and just kind of see what happens and then track the ROI on that. So that's what I'm looking at. My rule of thumb, 80-20, 80% is what everyone else is doing, what I know works, and do not flip-flop that. If I'm a realtor and I'm spending 80% of my budget on radio ads, I'm losing. Like that's too far out there, too harebrained.
And the nice thing about effective marketing campaigns, we can easily track those back to your financial statements. We can see what that money is doing or not doing. And we also know that the tried and true methods will always bring us a return. That's why I like your rule of the 80-20 is because 80% of it, we know that our sales are not going to dip because we've invested in what will bring us that return to keep our sales where they're currently at or higher. Why we experiment with a few other things to see if we can raise that bar and increase those sales.
Yeah. So I want to, and we're going to wrap up here. There's a lot of different wasters. And so I'm going to wrap up with two thoughts. The first one is to just say, we're scratching the surface. We're only talking about a couple items that are big, time and money wasters. You need to do inventory in your business, in your personal business. You need to look and see. And if you want to know where you're wasting money, just talk to your employees and find out where their pain points are, where their frustrations are. If someone's frustrated, there's money that's being wasted there. People don't get frustrated over systems that work really well. They get frustrated over things that are broken. They get frustrated when they're having to deal with something that, has no benefit to the company and it just sucked 4 hours out of their day, and so if you want to know where time wasters are, just start talking to the employees, ask them where their frustrations are. I guarantee, and I keep saying time wasters, but I should be clarifying money, but I guarantee that you're losing money if there's frustration there. But the second thing that I want to talk about, and this is I'm going to use advertisement, but this can translate to manufacturing. This can translate to, the financial accounting, whatever. It's chasing the sexy, right? When you get into advertisement, someone's going to knock on your door and they're going to tell you that, oh my gosh, we have 50,000 people that are going to see your ad. And if you only get 1% of those, think of all the,
that's right up there with fake customers.
But I, it's like 5 million cars pass this billboard every single day. I'm like, yay.
But is it your target market? Does it fit with who you're trying to attract?
Yeah. And so what happens is we're all humans. We all get sucked into the sexy, big claims. We want big returns, and it's this idea of, it's like, oh, I'm gonna just make all my money. And I would relate this to kind of a basketball game. Like, how many points are scored with basic layups versus how many points are scored with half court shots? Like a half court shot. Sure, it's won a lot of games, and those are pretty exciting games when all of a sudden someone just hucks that ball and it's a buzzer shot and everyone's cheering. Like, that's sexy. That's exciting. But it was all of the 40 layups that they did that made that half court shot possible. And so as a business, man, just you don't get sucked into the sexy. Business is made, money is made on boring things, very repetitive, boring things. Make all your money. And so if you're wasting a lot of time chasing the sexy, you read the new book and it tells you about this great new idea. And I'm like, it's fine. Keep your mind open to new ideas, but
figure how to make it work within that 20% that you can gamble with.
Yeah.
If you want to experiment with that, great, but don't dip into your larger marketing campaign funds to do it. Mm-hmm. Don't do it.
Yeah. And like I said, we're using advertisement as as kind of the example here, but you could do the same thing with manufacturing. If you've got a product that you're like, oh my gosh, if this works, we'll be multi-billionaires. And I'm like, yeah, but if it fails, then what? And if it's a long shot, don't dump all your resources into it. Stay smart, have a little bit of patience, have some discipline, and keep that balance. There's nothing wrong with doing these things. This is how great businesses are made. They take risks, but they take calculated, educated risks.
Right. So in wrapping up, we've talked about the two most common ones. I also want to just, look back into your business. There's lots of other areas where money wasters exist, not collecting accounts receivables, too much of an expense budget for things like lunches and drinks for everybody. Those add up. There's lots of little places like that you can clean up if you'll just start looking back and to find out where they are. And then because a lot of times we use what we think are incentives that are not really incentives, and they're just money wasters. So if you find the appropriate incentives, if you want to push things towards your employees to keep them happy and productive, to do that one. But certainly, I guarantee you right now, if you go and look at your business, you're going to find something on overstaffing or staffing in general, and marketing / advertising that you're going to be able to clean up, guaranteed.
Yeah. So with that, I think we're going to wrap up. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we will catch you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Take control of your business today. Go to LearnDesk.us and search Marketing Management and Money for the small business insights you've always wanted. Be sure to stay tuned for new episodes on the first and third Wednesdays of every month, and make sure to subscribe to be notified when we release bonus content such as interviews and short discussions.